The wedding is off. I don't love you anymore. Brandon said it loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear. The Saturday lunch crowd at the Italian bistro in Portland, Oregon, fell silent. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward our table by the window, the one he had specifically asked for when we arrived. I sat still for a moment, my fork hovering over my plate of chicken parmesan. His words lingered in the air, heavy and unmistakable. At the nearby table sat his friends, the ones he had insisted join us for what he called a casual weekend lunch, watching with barely hidden interest. My name is Megan, and I am 27 years old. Sitting across from the man I had spent 4 years with, something inside me shifted. Not breaking, but settling like a lock clicking into place. I gently set my fork down. Brandon watched me with an expression I had seen before, but never fully understood until then. A mix of satisfaction and expectation, like someone waiting to see the outcome of a deliberate act. "Thank you for being honest," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That was not the response he had expected. I reached for my left hand and slowly removed the engagement ring. He had proposed 2 years earlier at his parents' anniversary dinner, also in front of an audience. I slipped the ring into my jacket pocket. "You know what?" I said calmly. "I think I'm going to throw a narrow escape party." One of his friends laughed, then another. Brandon's smirk deepened. He was enjoying this. In that moment, I realized this scene had been planned. The setting, the timing, the witnesses, so he could watch me fall apart in public. But I didn't. "A narrow escape party," I repeated quietly, more to myself than anyone else. "Yes, that feels right." The laughter faded when they realized I wasn't crying, raising my voice, or reacting the way Brandon had anticipated. Instead, I lifted my water glass and took a slow sip. "Megan," Brandon said, his tone sharpening. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you clearly," I replied. "You don't love me anymore. The wedding is off. I believe I already thanked you for your honesty." His jaw tightened. This was not going according to plan. I pulled my wallet from my purse and placed enough cash on the table to cover my meal, along with a generous tip for the server, who would likely have an interesting story after her shift. "I have to say, Brandon, you chose quite a setting for this," I said as I stood and gathered my things. "A crowded restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. Your friends here as witnesses. Very theatrical." His face reddened slightly. "I thought you deserved the truth." "And I got it," I said. "More truth than you probably meant to give." I looked at his friends, Tyler, Josh, and Kevin, who were now avoiding eye contact. The amusement had drained from their faces, replaced by discomfort. "Gentlemen," I said with a nod, "thank you for being here. Your presence has been informative." As I walked toward the exit, I felt every stare in the room, but instead of embarrassment, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. 4 years. I had given Brandon 4 years of my life. In one carefully staged moment, he showed me exactly who he was, deliberately, not impulsively. He had planned the end of our relationship the way someone plans an event. Outside, the cool air hit my face. I took a deep breath. My hands were steady, my eyes were dry. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel. Only then, alone, did I let the moment fully sink in. What I felt was not devastation. It was recognition. I had seen Brandon clearly, and the man he revealed was not someone I wanted to marry. That realization felt freeing. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Natalie. "How was lunch?" I stared at the screen before typing back. "Wedding is canceled. I'll explain later, but I'm okay. Actually, I think I'm better than okay." Her reply came immediately. "What? I'm coming over tonight." I set the phone down and started the car. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the restaurant. Through the window, I could see Brandon still seated, his friends gathered around him. He was probably telling them I was in shock, that I hadn't processed what happened yet. He had no idea what was really happening. He had just handed me the key to a door I didn't realize was locked. The drive home gave me time to think, and what came to mind were all the moments I had chosen not to see clearly over the past 4 years. I met Brandon at 23, fresh out of college and working my first job as an assistant event coordinator at a conference center in downtown Portland. He was 25, a marketing associate at a pharmaceutical distribution company. He was confident and charming in a way that made you feel seen when he focused on you. Our first date was at a coffee shop near the waterfront. He listened closely as I talked about my dream of starting my own event planning business. He nodded at the right moments, asked thoughtful questions. Looking back, I realized he was collecting information, not building a connection. By the end of our first year, I had started reshaping my life around his preferences. He didn't like my college friends, so I saw them less. My apartment was inconvenient for him, so I moved closer to his office. He said starting a business was risky and encouraged me to focus on advancing at my current job. I put my plans on hold. I told myself these were normal compromises. Relationships required give and take, but most of the giving was mine. When I defended Brandon to friends and family, I repeated excuses I'd heard others use. He's stressed from work. He didn't mean it that way. You don't know him like I do. Last Christmas, my mother pulled me aside, concern clear in her eyes. Megan, does Brandon actually make you happy? I brushed it off with a practiced smile. Of course, Mom. We're getting married. But happy wasn't the right word. Comfortable, maybe. Invested. I had poured so much into the relationship that admitting it might fail felt like admitting 4 years of wasted effort. The engagement happened 18 months in. Brandon proposed at his parents' 40th anniversary party in front of their extended family and social circle. I said yes while hundreds of phones recorded the moment. What else could I say? That was when I should have noticed the pattern. Brandon loved an audience. He valued moments that made him look impressive to others. The proposal wasn't about us. It was about the display. Wedding planning followed the same pattern. I wanted a small ceremony with close friends and family. Brandon wanted 300 guests, many of them strangers to me. I wanted a simple venue. He wanted the most expensive hotel ballroom because it fit the image his business contacts expected. Whenever I objected, he framed it as practicality. This isn't just about you, Megan. This is about our future, our careers. By that, he meant his. My job didn't depend on impressing pharmaceutical executives and their spouses. Still, I gave in repeatedly because somewhere along the way, I had stopped trusting my own judgment. Brandon had a way of presenting his preferences as reasonable necessities while framing my wants as emotional excess. I pulled into my apartment complex and stayed in the car for a few minutes, thinking about the quiet ways he had exercised control. There was the dinner party where he corrected my pronunciation, laughing it off as a joke while making sure everyone noticed my mistake. There was how he praised me in public but criticized me in private. My clothes, my hair, the way I told stories. There were plans he made without asking me first, followed by wounded reactions when I expressed frustration. And then there was money. Brandon earned more than I did, and he made sure I never forgot it. He paid for expensive dinners and trips, but those gestures came with unspoken conditions. When I offered to contribute or suggested more affordable options, he would say, "Let me handle it. You don't need to worry about money." What he meant was, I'm in control. You don't get a say. I had been so focused on keeping the relationship intact that I failed to notice how much smaller I had become within it. The woman who once planned her own business now asked permission to meet friends for lunch. The woman with firm opinions now deferred to Brandon on nearly every decision. Sitting there, I felt the weight of those 4 years differently than I had an hour earlier. This wasn't the ending of a love story. It was an exit I hadn't realized I needed. My phone buzzed again. It was Brandon. That wasn't the reaction I expected. "We should talk." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I didn't reply. That evening, Natalie arrived with 2 bottles of wine and a determined look. "Tell me everything," she said, settling onto the couch. All of it. So I told her about the restaurant, the announcement, his friends watching like an audience, how he had chosen the table, insisted they join us, how the entire lunch felt staged from the moment we walked in. Natalie's expression moved from concern to understanding to something close to validation. "I knew it," she said quietly. "I've known something was wrong for a long time. I've watched you change. The woman who argued with professors and stayed up all night working on her business plan started asking permission to get coffee with me. Do you know how many times I wanted to say something?" I felt embarrassed. "Why didn't you?" "Because you weren't ready," she said calmly. And because if I pushed, he would have used it to isolate you more. I needed you to see it yourself. Her words settled in. She had been watching, waiting, protecting our friendship without forcing a confrontation I would have defended against. What bothers me most, I said, is that he planned it. This wasn't impulsive. He chose a public place. He invited witnesses. He wanted to humiliate me. Natalie nodded. He wanted to break you. He expected tears, desperation, and when you didn't give him that, it threw him. Almost on cue, my phone buzzed again. I think you're in shock. This isn't like you. Call me when you're ready to talk. Natalie shook her head. Men like him expect a script. When they don't get it, they don't know what to do. I set the phone face down. His friends had laughed at first. When I removed the ring and mentioned a narrow escape party, they thought it was funny, like I didn't understand what was happening. So what made them stop laughing? Natalie asked. I thought for a moment. I think it was when I didn't fall apart. When I thanked him and walked away calmly, it didn't fit their expectations. Natalie poured wine and handed me a glass. So, are you actually throwing this party? The idea had come out instinctively, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. I think I am, I said. Not to mock him or create drama, I want to take control of the story. Brandon would tell his version, cast himself as the reasonable one, paint me as unstable or pitiful. But if I framed this as something I escaped, not something done to me, I removed his leverage. Natalie smiled. You're not the abandoned fiancé. You're the woman who avoided a bad future. Exactly. We talked for hours, and more pieces fell into place. Natalie pointed out patterns I hadn't seen, the conditions attached to compliments, the expectations behind generosity, the gradual distancing from people who might challenge his influence. Then I remembered something else. Tyler was filming, I said. I saw his phone when I stood up. Natalie's expression hardened. He wanted proof. He wanted footage of you breaking down. The realization was immediate and cold. This wasn't just a public breakup. It was a production. He wanted documentation to support a narrative. That explained his confusion when I didn't react as expected. He was waiting for content. Content for what? I didn't yet know, but I knew there was more beneath the surface. This had been planned too carefully to be only about ending the relationship. I need to understand why, I said. Not to change anything, but to fully see what I had been dealing with. Natalie squeezed my hand. Whatever you find, I'm here, and I'm proud of you. The woman I saw today, that's who I've been waiting to see for 4 years. For the first time, I felt something close to hope. Tomorrow, I would look deeper. Tonight, I would rest. Over the next few days, Brandon's messages shifted from confused to irritated. Sunday morning, this silence is immature. Sunday night, I didn't do this to hurt you. Monday, people are asking questions. You need to help explain this. Tuesday, I heard you're throwing a party. Are you trying to embarrass me? I answered none of them. For the first time in years, I wasn't adjusting my behavior to suit him. The quiet felt stronger than I expected. I also began untangling the practical details. The wedding was scheduled for April, 6 months away. We had deposits on everything, the venue, catering, photography, flowers, all under my name, because Brandon said it was easier that way. Now I suspected another reason. I called the venue first. Patricia, the coordinator I knew from work, was sympathetic. The deposit was non-refundable, she said, but she could offer a credit for a future event. Actually, I replied, an idea forming, I might want to use it sooner than planned. Would next month work? Patricia paused, then asked, intrigued, what kind of event are you planning? A celebration, I said, of new beginnings. The caterer responded with the same understanding. The photographer offered to refund half the deposit as a goodwill gesture. The florist, who had become a friend during months of planning, said she would gladly provide arrangements for whatever I planned next. No labor charge. Each call reinforced something I had slowly begun to understand during those long planning sessions. The professionals I worked with had noticed what I hadn't. When I explained that the wedding was canceled because my fiancé ended the relationship, more than one responded with some version of, I'm sorry, but honestly, I wondered how long it would last. When I asked Dominic, the florist who had helped me source sustainable designs, what he meant, he answered plainly. Every time you came in, you were stressed and apologetic. You kept changing things because he wanted something different. Brides revise plans all the time, but you seem to be trying to satisfy someone who could never be satisfied. That isn't how wedding planning is supposed to feel. His words stayed with me. By Wednesday, I had a clear plan for the coming weeks. The narrow escape party would be held at the same venue originally booked for the reception, using the existing deposit. The date would be 3 weeks out, enough time to prepare, but close enough that the story would still be current. I started building a guest list, and that's when something caught my attention. Because Brandon and I had planned the wedding together, I still had access to all shared documents, including the master guest list. As I scrolled, I noticed a separate document I hadn't created or seen before. It was titled Priority Notifications and listed about 40 names, his friends, colleagues, and extended family members. Beside each name was a note, Wedding Update. Send immediately. I checked the document history and felt my stomach tighten. Brandon had created the list 2 weeks before that Saturday lunch, 2 weeks before he ended things. He had been preparing his announcement well in advance. Digging further, I found a draft message he planned to send. As some of you witnessed today, I made the difficult decision to end my engagement to Megan. This wasn't easy, but I realized I couldn't commit to it to a future someone whose values, and goals didn't align with mine. It framed him as thoughtful and decisive, and me as the issue. Carefully written language meant to guide perception. There was more. In his sent folder, I found messages to his friends from that morning before we arrived at the restaurant. Today's the day. Bistro at 12:30. I want you there to witness. This is going to be good. Tyler replied. Finally. Been waiting for this. I'll record everything. They hadn't just shown up, they were part of it. My hands shook as I kept reading. Another message, sent the night before, this one to someone named Rebecca. Tomorrow I'm ending things with Megan. Thank you for being patient. I can't wait to start our new chapter. I didn't know a Rebecca, but Brandon clearly did. I leaned back from the screen. This wasn't just a planned breakup. It was a coordinated effort. He had a replacement lined up, an audience assembled, a message prepared, and an expectation of my public collapse. The only detail he hadn't accounted for was my refusal to break. My phone buzzed again. I don't understand why you're ignoring me. This isn't healthy. For the first time since Saturday, I replied. I'm not ignoring you. I'm choosing not to engage in conversations that benefit you at my expense. We're done communicating. His response came immediately. That's cold. I expected more from you. I turned off my phone and returned to the documents. There was still more to uncover. As I reviewed everything, the timeline became clear. Brandon hadn't been planning this for weeks. It had been months. The evidence was spread throughout our shared files and accounts, details I had overlooked because I trusted him. Rebecca wasn't new. Through our shared phone plan records, I saw they had been communicating since early summer, 5 months before the public breakup. The calls started brief and occasional, then grew longer and more frequent. I didn't need the messages themselves. The pattern said enough. The breakup wasn't an ending. It was a transition. What I still didn't understand was the need for a public spectacle. If he wanted to leave for someone else, he could have done it privately. The performance suggested another motive. The answer came Thursday evening when Natalie called, her voice controlled but angry. One of her coworkers knew Tyler's girlfriend, and apparently people had been talking. Brandon had been telling his friends for months that I was emotionally unstable, clingy, controlling, prone to outbursts. He claimed he was afraid to end things privately. I felt the air leave my lungs. None of that was true. Natalie agreed, but explained that was the narrative he'd been building. The public breakup was designed to create witnesses. He wanted proof of a reaction he could point to as validation, but I hadn't reacted the way he expected. Exactly, Natalie said. That's why he's panicking. His plan required you to fall apart. I thought of Tyler filming. He wanted video evidence that supported the story Brandon had been telling. Instead, he captured me thanking him and leaving calmly. The manipulation was more extensive than I'd realized. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a constructed storyline meant to protect him and damage me. And by staying composed, I had dismantled it. Natalie added that Brandon had been calling people all week, trying to explain why I hadn't reacted as predicted. He kept saying I was in shock, that the breakdown was coming. He needed me to fall apart. Without it, his story didn't work. After the call, I sat quietly, thinking about the many times Brandon had told me what others supposedly thought of me. My friends think you're too intense. My mother thinks you're not ambitious enough. I had believed him. Adjusted myself. Tried to fix things that might never have existed. It finally occurred to me that he had been shaping those opinions himself, laying groundwork for his exit. The scale of it was overwhelming. This wasn't a relationship that simply failed. It was one person systematically controlling another while preparing a reputational escape. But there was one thing Brandon hadn't considered. I still had access to everything. Shared documents, shared accounts, shared history. He assumed I'd be too devastated to look closely. He underestimated me, maybe for all 4 years. I opened my laptop and began organizing what I'd found. The timeline, the messages, the planning behind the public breakup. The draft announcement meant to manage perception. The phone records showing months of contact with Rebecca. I had no intention of exposing any of it publicly. That would have made me appear vindictive and given him material to support his story of instability. Instead, I chose a quieter and more effective approach. I would allow the facts to speak on their own. The narrow escape party would not center on Brandon at all. It would focus on me, my independence, my future, and my right to define my own life. If certain facts surfaced along the way, that would simply be the truth coming out naturally. I began drafting the invitation. It would not mention Brandon by name or reference the breakup directly. It would invite people to celebrate a new chapter, marking the close of one door and the opening of another. The guest list would include my close friends, family, and coworkers, but also some of the people Brandon had positioned as witnesses to my supposed breakdown. I wanted them to see me doing well and compare the person they had been told about with the person in front of them. If anyone asked what happened, I would tell them, plainly and factually, without exaggeration or anger. The truth, I realized, required no embellishment. Brandon had done enough on his own. The next 2 weeks were busy and practical, which helped keep me grounded. I poured my energy into planning with a focus I hadn't felt in years. My early training as an event coordinator proved useful as I reshaped the wedding venue into something entirely different. Instead of traditional white linens and formal centerpieces, I chose bold colors and mixed decor that reflected my real taste, the one I had set aside for years to fit Brandon's preferences. As plans moved forward, the guest list grew. People I'd lost touch with during my relationship began reaching out after hearing through mutual connections that my life had shifted. My former roommate, Elena, called from Boston. She asked if I was okay after hearing the wedding was off. I explained calmly that Brandon had ended things publicly in a restaurant with witnesses. There was a pause before she responded. Then she admitted she had been dreading the wedding. Over the past few years, she said, I had sounded smaller, less like myself. She had hoped I would eventually see what was happening. Her words echoed what others had already implied. Natalie, Dominic, the vendors. I asked why no one had said anything. Elena answered simply that I would have defended him and pulled away. They had been waiting for me to be ready. That word stayed with me. I hadn't been ready until Brandon showed me who he was in a setting so public and calculated that even my habit of excusing him couldn't survive it. The invitation design came together easily. An open door with light streaming through and a simple message inviting people to celebrate a new beginning with me. There was no mention of canceled weddings or broken engagements, only forward movement. At the same time, I prepared quietly for the conversations that might happen. I knew some guests would come to support me, while others from Brandon's circle might attend out of curiosity or report back to him. I wanted them to see me as I was now, steady, composed, and doing well. I also wanted to be ready if questions came up. I didn't script responses, but I was clear with myself. If asked why the wedding ended, I would explain calmly that Brandon had ended it publicly with friends present by his design. If pressed further, I would mention the pre-written messages, the recording, and the months-long affair. I wouldn't volunteer details unnecessarily. but I wouldn't hide the truth either. With help from the venue coordinator, the details were finalized. The party was set for the third Saturday in October, exactly 3 weeks after the public breakup. The guest list reached 70 people, a mix of friends, family, and colleagues who had watched me gradually disappear over 4 years. My mother arrived from Denver 2 days before the event. When she saw me, she cried, then hugged me tightly. She told me she could finally see her daughter again. As we finished preparations, she shared the concerns she and my father had held and the difficult choice to wait rather than interfere. She had prayed for clarity, she said, not for humiliation, but for understanding. I told her he had made things clear. The night before the party, Brandon sent one final message. It was longer and more urgent than the others. He warned me that people were talking and suggested I was making a mistake. He reminded me that he had his own version of events and implied he would respond if I tried to make him look bad. I read it twice, then deleted it without replying. He was afraid. The story he had worked to control was slipping away. For the first time in a long while, I went to bed feeling anticipation rather than anxiety, not the constant effort of managing someone else's reactions, but a simple readiness for what came next. The invitations went out on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, questions started circulating. People who had been at the restaurant were contacting mutual acquaintances. The invitation itself was neutral, but paired with rumors, it raised curiosity. Messages passed through friend groups and coworkers. Brandon, I heard, was calling people constantly, trying to get ahead of whatever he thought I would say. He framed the party as proof of my instability, warning others not to attend. Instead, his urgency had the opposite effect. The more he explained, the more people questioned his version. When they compared his agitation to the calm woman who had walked away from that restaurant, the story didn't align. The day before the party, I received a call from someone I hadn't expected. Brandon's younger sister, Addison, called. "Megan," she said carefully, "I heard what happened, and I heard about the party. I just wanted to check in." Addison and I had never been close. I realized later that Brandon had kept a deliberate distance between me and his family, though she had always been polite. "I appreciate you reaching out," I replied, choosing my words. She continued, "I don't know everything that happened between you and my brother. He has his version, and I'm sure you have yours. But I want you to know I never believed what he said about you." I asked what that was. After a pause, she said he described me as difficult and overly emotional, that he was afraid to end things because of how I might react. Then she added, "But Megan, I watched you at family events for 4 years. You were never like that. You were accommodating to the point of disappearing. I used to wonder why you never pushed back." Her words landed heavily. I hadn't pushed back because I thought that was what love required. "I know," she said softly, "and I'm sorry none of us spoke up sooner. My mother has been asking questions this week. I think she's starting to see things differently too." After we hung up, I sat with the conversation for a long time. Addison's call felt like the first fracture in Brandon's carefully built narrative. If his own sister was questioning it, others would likely follow. The venue looked striking when I arrived Saturday morning for the final walkthrough. The hotel ballroom had been transformed from a standard wedding setup into something personal and alive. Warm, bold colors filled the space. Deep oranges, rich purples, hints of gold. String lights crossed the ceiling, and the tables held sunflowers and wildflowers instead of the white roses Brandon had selected for the wedding. My mother found me standing in the center of the room, taking it all in. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free?" I said. "I feel free." Guests began arriving at 7 p.m. Natalie came first, then Elena, who had flown in from Boston, followed by a steady stream of faces I hadn't seen in years. College friends, early career coworkers, cousins and aunts who had always supported me, but whom I had kept at a distance during my relationship with Brandon. Each arrival felt like a return. These were the people I had slowly pushed aside after Brandon convinced me they didn't understand us, that they were negative influences, that I should prioritize our shared life over individual connections. And yet, they came back. By 8 p.m., the room was full and the atmosphere was exactly what I had hoped for. Warm, celebratory, genuinely happy. People laughed, reconnected, and asked about my plans. Eventually, the questions surfaced. "So what really happened?" Elena asked quietly. She said the story Brandon was telling didn't match the woman she saw in front of her. I took a breath and told her the facts: the planned breakup, the arranged witnesses, the recording, the months-long affair with Rebecca. I showed her the screenshots I had saved, not displayed publicly, but available to anyone who asked. She processed it silently, then said, "That's sociopathic. He planned your public humiliation." "He did," I agreed. "But he misjudged the outcome. He expected me to fall apart, and I didn't." The information spread faster than I expected. By 9 p.m., small groups were in serious conversations. Phones were passed around, screenshots shared, and the narrative shifted in real time. I didn't need to exaggerate or retaliate. I answered questions honestly and let the evidence speak. The real turning point came when Jennifer, Kevin's wife, approached me. She had been at that Saturday lunch, sitting with Brandon's friends. "Megan," she said, visibly tense, "I owe you an apology." She explained that when Brandon described his plan, Kevin framed it as an intervention, said Brandon needed support to leave an unhealthy relationship. She hadn't known about the recording or the affair. "I thought we were helping a friend," she said. "Now I feel sick. I was part of something cruel." She added that she had kept thinking about how calm and composed I was that day. That's not how someone behaves if they're unstable, like Brandon claimed. Jennifer wasn't alone. Throughout the night, I watched Brandon's version unravel as people reassessed what they had seen. Tyler, who had recorded the breakup, was being questioned by his girlfriend. Josh had stopped replying to Brandon's messages. The group that had gathered to witness my humiliation was now pulling away from the person who arranged it. Around 10 p.m., Brandon arrived. I saw him at the entrance before he noticed me, scanning the room with barely controlled anger. He was wearing the button-down shirt I had given him for his birthday, which felt intentional or careless. I wasn't sure which. The room didn't fall silent, but the energy shifted. Conversations lowered as he moved toward me. "Megan," he said tightly, "what do you think you're doing?" I faced him calmly. "I'm hosting a party, Brandon. You aren't invited." He accused me of trying to destroy him, of lying and showing fake evidence. I told him evenly that I hadn't shared anything untrue, and that everything I showed came from our shared documents he created. When he accused me of going through his files, I corrected him. Our files, the same ones I always had access to. People nearby were openly listening. Jennifer watched closely. Elena held her phone, clearly recording. Brandon's voice rose as he called me unstable and vindictive. I raised my hand. "Brandon, look around this room. Look at the people who knew me before you. Do I look unstable? Do I look vindictive?" He looked, and what he saw was a room full of skepticism, discomfort, and pity. I continued, outlining the facts. His planned humiliation, the recording, the pre-written messages, the affair with Rebecca. All documented, all true. He tried to respond, but the words lacked conviction. I told him he wanted me to fall apart so he could justify leaving, and when that didn't happen, he lost control of the story. His presence there only confirmed everything. The silence afterward was decisive. Brandon looked around, then turned and left. The party continued, but the mood shifted into something reflective, like a collective release. People approached me to apologize, to express support, to acknowledge what they had misunderstood. I accepted their words calmly. What I felt wasn't victory or validation, it was peace. The band played, the dance floor filled, and I watched people I loved move freely through the space. My mother danced with my uncle. Natalie taught Elena a ridiculous move from college. Co-workers mingled with cousins. This was the life I was moving toward. Expansive, connected, real. The evening wound down around midnight. As guests left, Elena hugged me and said she knew I'd find my way back, just not like this. "Neither did I said, "but I'm grateful." In the weeks that followed, the consequences spread through Brandon's life. His professional image suffered as the truth circulated among shared networks. Rebecca ended the relationship after learning how he had treated me. Tyler and Josh distanced themselves. Jennifer filed for divorce 3 months later, citing the incident as a turning point. Brandon struggled to recover socially. The image he had built, successful, principled, victimized, collapsed. People remembered him arriving uninvited his accusations failing under evidence, and the disconnect between his claims and my behavior. I didn't follow his situation closely. Once the truth was out, my focus shifted fully to my future. I finally built the event planning business I had imagined for years. I left my job, started on my own terms, and within 6 months had clients. Within a year, I had more work than I could manage alone. Relationships I had neglected slowly healed. Friendships returned. Family bonds strengthened. I learned that the people who truly loved me had never left. They had been waiting. I also learned that the version of myself Brandon tried to shape, the small, agreeable, apologetic woman, was never real. It was a role I played because I believed that was what love demanded. Real love, I discovered, didn't require me to shrink. Standing in my new office on the 1-year anniversary of that lunch, I reflected on how differently things unfolded than Brandon intended. He meant to break me publicly and justify himself through my pain. Instead, that moment marked the start of everything good that followed. The woman he tried to humiliate became stronger than expected. Brandon never fully recovered. His company restructured months later and he was let go. His network became a liability, and eventually he moved to another city to start over. Meanwhile, others faced their own consequences. As I locked up my office and stepped into the cool autumn air, I thought about that day in the restaurant. The expectation that I would collapse, the eyes waiting for me to fall. Instead, I had smiled and thanked him for his honesty. What he designed as my destruction became my freedom. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The narrow escape party was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and no longer apologizing for who I was meant to be.